I'm going to talk to you about how expectations lead to resentments. There's a saying that I heard a lot in recovery programs, and that was a resentment is the beginning, or an expectation is the beginning of a resentment. And that's absolutely true. And it kind of has to do with the analogy of a fire. So with a fire, first you have wood, and then you have a spark, and then you add more wood to the fire, right? And then you get the fire gets bigger and bigger the more wood that you add. Same thing with resentments. So the first thing that you have is an expectation, which is the wood, and then the spark is that the expectation is not met. The person doesn't do what you expected, and then the more that you feel the resentment, the more the fire or the resentment grows and grows and grows. The more you fuel it with thinking about how the person has not met your expectation, the more the fire goes, the bigger the resentment grows. So it is expectation is basically what it means is it's just something that you anticipated happening. You expected it to happen. It can be goes along with shoulds. You should do this for me. You should not do that. You should pick up your socks and put them in the hamper if you're married, or you should cook dinner every other night, or you should help me with the dishes, or you should do half the housekeeping. I'm not saying that any of these expectations are wrong or unusual or anything. It's just, or you should talk to me more respectfully, or you should give me time alone, or you should go with me when I go shopping, or you should always go with me when I go visit my parents, or you should let me discipline my stepdaughter. You should not let her think that she doesn't have to do what I say. I mean, anything. We could go on and on and on and on about what shoulds are. You should uh, you should keep your room clean if you're talking with a child, or you should do your homework right away when you get home from school. These are no judgment on any of these, okay? Expectation is that you anticipate something happening, pretty sure it's going to happen. You want it to happen. When it doesn't happen, you're not happy. So, how does this work then? First of all, expectations can be reasonable or unreasonable. So an unreasonable expectation is that you will always want to do everything I want to do in a marriage. Like you're going to be just like me. If I like something, you're going to like it. You're always going to be happy no matter what I do. You're going to like everything. You're going to be never going to be upset with me. You're never going to be disagree with me. Those are, you know, expectations that are completely unreasonable. Expectation could also be unreasonable if it is not something that a person is capable of doing or willing to do, or has shown you that they're not going to do. So you could expect an unhealthy person to act in a healthy way. You're married to somebody who's unhealthy, who's dysfunctional, who can't resolve conflict, and yet you go into a discussion about something that's bothering you with the expectation that this person is going to handle it like a healthy person. That's an unreasonable expectation. So if you continue to hold those unreasonable expectations for your situation, you're going to end up even more and more unhappy and more resentful. Not saying that the fact that that person won't do that or can't do that is okay, or that you have to be okay with it, or you have to, that you can't set boundaries or speak your truth, none of that. Just basically saying your expectations can be reasonable or unreasonable in a normal situation, or because maybe they're too rigid, or it won't work, or maybe you have an expectation that your spouse should be home at 5 o'clock every day, but your spouse has a job that requires him or her to work overtime, or the traffic can be really bad one day and it might get home later. So I mean, that would be an example. So it could be reasonable or unreasonable, but then you have to ask yourself, okay, maybe my expectation is reasonable, But for this person, that person is not capable of doing it. And therefore, I have to decide if I should change my expectation for this person so that I'm not continually disappointed and on this roller coaster of expectation not met, that you're resentful. Again, you have the hopes that the expectation is going to be met, and then it's not, and then you're more resentful, and you're just constantly on this emotional roller coaster about your expectations not being met. So the first thing you do is you recognize the expectation, and then you look at it and you say, is it reasonable or unreasonable for this situation, this job, this person I'm married to, my child, my parent who's always been difficult, critical, is now old and critical and difficult? Is it a reasonable expectation that this parent is going to now not be difficult and critical? No, not reasonable that this parent is not going to be critical and not be difficult when the person's been that way all their lives. So the next thing is when you have that expectation and you notice it's not happening, then you have to decide, do I need to adjust my expectation? And do I need to change my thoughts about it? So again, you make an adjustment of your expectation, bring it back into a reasonable expectation, realistic expectation, reasonable expectation for your situation. And if you find that your expectation is not being met and you find that the resentment is growing, that your thoughts, that you're focusing on it, you're thinking about it, you're annoyed, irritated, and you find yourself thinking, person isn't home, the person should be home, the person is supposed to be there on time, they should help me, they're sitting and watching TV, they should do this. All of this is adding up to that resentment and making that resentment grow. And resentment means to re-feel the original sentiment. So what you're doing is you're stirring it up. You're stirring up the feelings, you're stirring up the disappointment, you're stirring up the expectation that was not met. And it's just growing into this huge resentment to where you're probably going to say something or your attitude is going to show that you're upset. And again, not that it's not necessarily okay or not okay. You can tell with your thoughts that you're focusing on that expectation. Again, if you're doing the should not, ought to, if you're starting to feel sorry for yourself, if you're starting to think badly about the other person, you're building a case against them or her, building a case for what's your righteous desire, your righteous need, your righteous demand. And you find yourself again churning up these thoughts. We often use with expectations always and never, like he always thinks of himself. She never thinks about how tired I am. And then those will even fuel the resentment even more. You can find yourself comparing. Well, I do so much for this person. This person doesn't do anything for me. Not do anything again is a black and white thinking. I do everything for this person. This person doesn't do anything for me. So these are like comparisons. And so as you're building these thoughts against this person, you're going to find that the resentment's going to grow and grow and grow. Instead, you adjust your expectation to realistic expectation for your situation. And then the second thing is you capture your thoughts, which can prevent or literally snuff out that resentment and not give it the fuel that it desires. Remember, this is not denying, not pretending, not um, refusing to bring up what you need to talk about. It's not, doesn't mean you can't set a boundary, you can't speak your truth, but it just is merely looking at the expectations you have and recognizing how those expectations are resulting in you being resentful in your relationship, being upset, and causing problems for, first of all, you, because being on that roller coaster of hope and despair is definitely not a good place for you to be. It's not healthy and it leaves you discontented and unhappy. But it is definitely something that you have a lot of power over by changing your expectations. You can keep yourself from being continually upset. So, a couple of scriptures to think about are as far as looking at inward and being honest with ourselves. Psalm 51:6 says, "Surely you, meaning the Lord, desire truth in the inner parts, and you teach me wisdom in the inmost place." In other words, we got to look inward at ourselves to figure out what's going on if we want to have healthy relationships and grow and take responsibility for our part. And it says also, Proverbs 21:29 says, "A wicked man puts up a bold front, but an upright man gives thought to his ways." So we want to make sure that we do that. And then there's one more that I just thought of as I was talking to you that I didn't think of before to write down, and it is the perfect one to say that, let's see, it's 13:10. Oh, yes, it is Proverbs 13:12. "Hope deferred makes the heart sick, but a longing fulfilled is a tree of life." So when you have reasonable hope or unreasonable hope, which is an unreasonable expectation, you're going to not be happy. But when you have a reasonable expectation, and that longing is fulfilled, it's like a tree of life. In other words, if you have a reasonable expectation for a person and the person does it, you're actually going to feel good. Or if the person exceeds your expectations, you're going to feel a lot better than if you had rigid or high expectation and that person continually fails. And so it's going to make a huge difference. So I would suggest keeping your expectations reasonable to where the person has a chance to meet them, and you will find yourself much less resentful. This is not to say that you can't have righteous anger, that you can't point out things that are true, things that are not okay, or make decisions about boundaries like, I need to have this much cooperation or help or support or whatever it is. Different issue. Just talking about how an expectation can lead to resentment. Okay. Thank you for watching and for listening. And I hope you'll check out my resources, my classes. I've got so much that will help you to be healthy in the midst of unhealthy people. God bless.